I like this idea. Defecting to Reform UK should now be a euphemism for going for a shit. I take it we're editing this bit out. Hello and welcome again to Everything's Fine, probably your weekly antidote to the bad news and existential dread that most other news outlets like to deliver to you. And there's been a lot of that this week with Trump, Iran, Trump, Gaza, Trump, and Grok, which is both an AI and the sound democracy makes when it takes its dying breath. So yeah, it's been one of those weeks. But a story did come up just after we broadcast our last show that I want to talk about, even though it's not really good news, it's not funny news, but it is irony so dense it has its own gravitational pull. Robert Jenrick defected from the Conservative Party to Reform UK, which is a bit like switching deck chairs on the Titanic and then blaming the sea. And the immigrants, of course. If you happen to listen to last week's episode, you'll know I was critical of Conservative MPs fleeing the sinking ship and going to Reform. And then immediately another one does it. If you're not familiar with Robert Jenrick, he was the man who failed to become leader of the ailing political party a little over a year ago, before settling into the new shadow cabinet. Now, I'm sure Jenrick's defection was purely down to his strongly held political convictions and had nothing to do with Reform polling miles ahead of the Tories. I mean, I'm not suggesting that Robert Jenrick has no political convictions and's only out to further his own career. I'm only suggesting that if you were a jobbing politician with no political convictions, then you might behave exactly like Robert Jenrick. A reason that Jenrick gave for defecting to Reform was that he didn't trust the Conservative Party on immigration. Well, that's a one in the eye for the Conservatives' immigration minister, who was, up until Jenrick left the party, Robert Jenrick. That's right, he didn't trust the immigration minister, who was him, which is less a political argument and more a cry for help. Now, I'm not saying that Robert Jenrick is an idiot. I'm only suggesting that if your political judgment includes "I can't trust myself," then you probably are an idiot. Or maybe a liar. Either way, HR will be wanting a word. And on that topic, you might remember that Robert Jenrick came up when we did our immigration special, when we pointed out that he was, how can I put this nicely, treating immigration statistics like a choose-your-own-adventure book to make them appeal to a certain section of the electorate. Now, I want to make it clear, I'm not suggesting that Robert Jenrick deliberately misled people about immigration. I'm only suggesting that if you're an actor preparing to play the role of the kind of person who wanted to weaponize immigration and stir up racial hatred to further your own political aims, then you might want to look at the behaviour of Robert Jenrick to help you get into character. Anyway, if you think Robert Jenrick sounds like the kind of guy you'd like to see in a position of significant political power in the future, you'll need to vote Reform UK at the next election. And as an added bonus, you'll have your human rights and provision of free healthcare at point of treatment removed. But if you have any doubts about Reform UK, and especially their leader, Nigel Farage, then you're not alone. As early as September last year, no less a man than Robert Jenrick was quoted in the London Economic as saying, "I don't think Nigel Farage is the kind of bloke you want to have running your kids' schools or running your local hospital, or trust with your savings, your pension, your small business. I'm not sure Nigel thinks he's the right person to do that himself." Wow, that's either an extraordinary change of heart or the sound of a man sprinting after a polling graph. Now, it probably won't surprise you to hear that Robert Jenrick describes himself as anti-woke, which is political shorthand for deeply upset by the idea of people being nice to one another. So he'd really hate tonight's episode, where very shortly we'll be talking to Emily Hamilton about Quins Pride, the first club rugby LGBTQ plus supporters group. But before we bring Emily in, let's bring in my co-presenters for this week. It's Stu and Gemma. How are we both?
Good evening. Is this the same Robert Jenrick who in 2023 was the immigration minister who ordered that murals of cartoon characters in a reception centre for child asylum seekers be painted over for being too welcoming.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that, Stuart. It is exactly the same Robert Jenrick. Yes,
Do you know what
absolutely.
Nigel Farage said at the time about that incident?
Um, I do actually, but go on, Stu. Tell us, tell us.
He said it was mean.
Did Nigel Farage thought that was mean?
Is this the same Robert Jenrick who granted permission for a £1 billion property deal to Richard Desmond of the porn empire? Was this the same Jenrick who approved that, who took a £12,000 donation to the Tory party and then
I,
overturned his own permission, admitting it was unlawful due to
I,
apparent bias?
I believe it might well be. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
when he's gone to reform on the radio, he did say he wasn't doing it for himself; he was doing it for the people.
He's doing it for the kids.
Well, for the people, he's doing it for us.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. What a big-hearted fellow he turned out to be.
He did. Hi, Gemma.
How did you both manage, Jim? How did you manage your way through Blue Monday?
By drinking copious amounts of chamomile tea.
Okay, okay.
I'm not sure that's like a.
So, what's chamomile tea? What had it? What's it? Is that a
What's
grass?
chamomile tea?
What is it? Flowers? What? I've never had it. What is this?
You've never had chamomile tea?
No. What's it for? Is it good for you?
It's for calming you.
Okay.
Rest and relaxation.
It's not like a proper cup of tea then. Do you put milk in this?
No. Oh, I mean, mind
That
you, I
that
don't
would
put milk in any tea, so I'm not really the person to ask.
We do know Blue Monday's made up, don't we? It was like a PR campaign in the 1980s. It's a load of nonsense.
was it made up by New Order to promote their forthcoming single?
Well, it wasn't. It was set up by a PR company to sell more holidays. This is the time of year when people traditionally book their summer holiday when it's cold and dark and so on. So the whole Blue Monday thing was invented to coincide with that.
Ooh.
So we should all just ignore it.
I mean, I did, to be fair. I can't say I enjoyed it significantly less than any other Monday.
I mean, Monday's Monday, isn't it? They're all blue. They're all Blue Monday, aren't they? But we did have a good Sunday, and we're going to talk about this later in the show. Quins won. What a triumph, Jim!
Quins did win, and we won well, giving us a home tie in the next round of the Champions Cup. So we're all very excited about that. On that topic, of course, we bought our tickets. We're all off to big summer kickoff again this year. So that'll be fun. And that is all four of the pod crowd amongst a few others. So, yeah, well,
Perfect.
put up a few photos as we get going on that.
So regarding Trump, because you mentioned Trump, I think we just get bored.
Yeah, I've got nothing more to say on him. Well, actually, the only thing I can say about Trump, which I do think is really interesting, I don't think we've ever seen anyone try to simultaneously start a civil war and a world war whilst at the same time begging for a peace prize.
Yeah, did you see he sent a letter to the Norwegian Prime Minister saying,
this was hilarious.
Saying, I've stopped 8 wars, I should have the Peace Prize. And the Norwegian Prime Minister said, doesn't work like that. I don't give the Peace Prize that. It goes through the voting committee and the board. So he said, all right, I'll invade Greenland then.
It's basically this thing of, well, as I haven't got a peace prize, I'm not really obliged to do peace, am I? So I'll just invade Greenland. Jesus Christ.
I think the European leaders have got his measure now, and this is how you deal with a narcissist and a bully, is just to let it play out. Let him shout and scream and threaten and so on, and let's actually see what he does. Don't react. Let's just see.
So in the same way you deal with the tantruming child, then?
Well, sure, because it is, isn't it? We're dealing with the same thing, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely identical. Now, just one thing I would like to mention just before we move on to the Quins stuff. That whole intro about Robert Jenrick. So I wrote that on Saturday, but the Conservatives are actually defecting to Reform UK quicker than we can record this podcast. And by Sunday, another one was gone. So that latest political comedian, his name is Andrew Rossendale, former Shadow Minister and MP for Romford. His reasons for defecting were, and I quote, irreparably bound to the mistakes of previous governments and not willing to take meaningful accountability for poor decisions. So it's taken this latest political heavyweight 25 years of being in the Tory party to work that out. I wonder how long it'll take for him to realise that Nigel Farage hasn't taken any meaningful accountability for recording a cameo tribute to disgraced Lost Prophets singer Ian Watkins. Some people, it turns out, will say absolutely anything for a couple £100. Okay, but let's move on from people who only ever write their principles in pencil to people who actually live theirs. Regular listeners will be used to the fact that we like to talk about rugby and that we especially like to talk about our beloved Harlequins Rugby Club. So this week's episode is about Quins Pride, the LGBTQ plus supporters group connected to Harlequins. It's about community, visibility, and this radical idea that you should be allowed to enjoy sport without pretending to be someone else. And crucially, it's about rugby proving that it can move into the 21st century without bursting into flames. So we're joined by Emily Hamilton, the co-chair of Quins Pride. Emily, welcome to Everything's Fine Probably. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, not at all. Not been the greatest season so far.
That's one way of putting it.
I think it's fair to say, but a good couple of weekends.
We have picked up the pace a little bit, which is nice for a whole load of reasons, isn't it? It's nice to see them playing well. It's nice to see some of the comment sections calm down a little bit on the old socials. So that's been quite nice.
Yeah, hopefully we can go into the weekend. Well, I was saying before we came on, I've now convinced myself that undoubtedly we will win on Saturday against Tigers. So I can't wait for that to come back and bite me on the backside.
No, it'll be fine. Just edit after the event. It doesn't.
Yeah. On Sunday, I popped around yours, didn't I, Jim? Because Emily, Jim's got a sort of shed, which it's a bit more glamorous than it sounds. So we go around there and we watch rugby. I actually saw Jim smile and jump up as well. So something good must have happened. For years, I was always like a big football fan and cricket fan. So I used to watch Norwich City quite a lot in football, but I got really bored with it. Got bored with the game. It's really sort of soulless. And so Jim started saying, well, try rugby. So I watched a couple of games and then he took me to the stoop. And then all of a sudden I found myself supporting the Quins. After this season, I think, couldn't he have supported maybe one of the top sides? But actually I've got to know all the players now. So it's too late. So I've gone all in on it. So that's my sort of story of how I got into rugby and Harlequins, so quite late in life. But what about yourself, Emily? Have you always enjoyed rugby, and how did you get into Harlequins?
Yeah, I mean, look, I got into rugby when I was really young. So I was about 6 when I got into rugby. Dad took me along to mini rugby at London Irish. That was where I started my playing days down at Sunbury. In the days when you had to prove you had Irish parentage or heritage to go and play, so I used to rock up there. But Harlequins were my local team. They were my local club. I grew up in Hounslow, just over the railway line. And so my first match at Harlequins, I think, was 1983. I think I was brought to a match at the Stoop, which wasn't the Stoop we know and love. It was a very different proposition in those days. I was on and off able to come and watch matches for many years, but of course I was playing, and I ended up playing to a pretty good level representatively. Always a Quins fan, as they always in and out as the money and being local allowed. Nearly came to play. There's a funny story here. So in a previous life, I turned up for a tryout with in the Dick Best era. I rocked up with a cigarette in my mouth, which apparently wasn't the thing to do. So I didn't really get much further than that in those days where I used to smoke. I was a big fan of Serge Blanco's approach to rugby, which seemed to involve cigarettes. So I was a Gauloise smoker as well, because that was my thing in those days. So I had a near Quins experience, but always been a fan and been a season ticket holder for. That must be something like 20 years since I could start to afford to have one, and I have to travel a bit further now. So I live reasonable distance from the Stoop now. But yeah, season ticket holder, sit with a great bunch of people, love the club, warm the quarters all around the world where they get a good notice from people. And yeah, there's something in the blood. And look, all the things we're saying about it being good and bad, we've had bad seasons. We've had some awful seasons. We've had some amazing seasons, and that's sport. That's what sport's all about. It's sometimes rough and sometimes smooth.
Yeah, I mean, often we sort of talk on this program about how sport brings people together and sort of sense of community. And I guess if you're sort of sitting with a good crowd, then sometimes it's just for the social, isn't it? If the rugby's not so good, at least you're there with your sort of friends, and you're catching up with them, and gives you a sort of sense of identity as well, doesn't it? Something you're part of. And Quins fans so far, the ones we've spoken to, there does seem to be a real sort of sense of community that runs through that club. That's something I picked up on it anyway.
Yeah, we're a really decent bunch. And look, rugby mostly rightly has a good reputation for being a sort of family community sport, and something where the fans are decent folks, and you don't have some of the issues that have been quite well publicised in football. I'm not sure it's as black and white as people paint it, and I'm not sure it's always as smooth as we'd like it to be, and maybe we'll touch on that. But yeah, you're right, and I think particularly if you have a season ticket, or if you always sit in the same sort of place, you get to know those people. You get to know the person who's always chirping at the referee and getting it wrong. You get to know the guy who's trying to impress his girlfriend in the row behind, who doesn't know the laws of the game, and you just want to turn around and say, "Look, girl, red flag, walk away. This guy's selling you a pup here."
Yeah.
You get to know the people who sit in front of you, who just are there week in, week out, no matter what. And yeah, it is a family, it is a community, and it's I don't know, it's a bit of home, right? My seat E193, that's part of my home, right? I've been shining that seat with my bottom for the last 20 odd years. I feel very proprietorial. If I see that, if there are other games played there, like an international or something, and somebody's that's my seat. You're in my seat.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you said you used to play rugby. What was your position? Where did you used to play?
Well, here's the thing, and it's a really rubbish thing to be a girl. I'm 6'7" tall, right? So, which is really appalling. And there's only one position you're going to play when you're 6'7", and that's second row. So I was an ungainly lock in the second row. I was very good in the line out. I was absolutely appalling at everything else, really. Actually, when it came down to it, I had a wonky run. I didn't score many tries. I scored 3 tries in 20-something seasons. But yeah, I was pretty good at pushing in the scrum, and I was pretty good at line outs.
When I was at school, though, the PE teacher there, he always used to say, rugby's the game anyone can play, because it's all down to different shapes and different sizes and so on and so forth. I mean, the modern game, they're elite athletes, but that hasn't always been the case. You talked about your Dick Bests and smoking cigarettes and so on. So the game's come a long way, hasn't it? But I still think it is open to everyone, isn't it? That's the good thing about rugby.
Yes and no. I mean that comes to the heart of sort of Quins Pride. It was a game for everyone in all shapes and sizes and all bodies, until a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, when the RFU, and then followed by the other home unions, banned trans women, largely trans women, but impacted trans men from playing as well. So while there's a lot of talk about it being a game for all shapes and sizes and all bodies, some bodies are not considered to be part of that mission. So that's a problem.
Let's move on to talk about Quins Pride. So for people who haven't come across Quins Pride before, what is it? How did it actually all come about, Emily?
Yeah, so Quins Pride, there were a group of us way back in 2020. Well, actually, it was 2019. So it was 2019, 2020, just round about when the pandemic kicked off, which was a wonderful time for everybody. We were talking about the Pride matches that Quins had just started. So we had our first Pride match back in 2019, for those of you who can remember, in the teeth of a hurricane. First club in Premiership Rugby to do anything like that. So the first club to really step up and say, we're going to have a Pride game. Something we've seen actually in other sports in other countries, but it's the first time we'd done something like that. And it was the club sort of reaching out to a few queer fans who'd made themselves known. Can we do some activation work? Can we sort of interview you for the next Pride match? Can we get involved? And there were a couple of us who said it would be really good if we had an LGBTQIA supporters association. They're ready to get together. It's something that nearly every Premiership football club has, nearly every Championship football club has. And yet not one single professional rugby club has got an LGBTQIA plus supporters association. So we came together. We thought that was a good idea. We in typical queer people fashion, we sort of bumbled around, not really getting ourselves organised for quite a long time. And then I got annoyed and sort of wrote up a sort of plan and said, look, this is what I think it should be and this is what we could be. And then a few other guys got involved and we basically set ourselves up. And with a really important thing about Quins Pride was we wanted to be part of the Quins family, but independent. We wanted to make sure we were able to hold a mirror up to the club and not be beholden to the club. So we're not funded by Harlequins. We're not, I don't work for Laurie, the CEO of Harlequins. I'm able to say to Laurie, if I think something's wrong or if I think we're not hitting the mark or we're not authentic, and that's really crucial, authenticity within the game, we're able to say that. So, really, really proud to be the founding chair. Great small committee. And it was all about us saying that some work has been done around queer people on the pitch. Not enough, because you tell me how many queer players there are in the Prem, right? And we know they're there, right? We know just by the law of averages the numbers are there, but
yeah.
they're not happy to come out. But actually, we were thinking much more from the supporter experience perspective. Although people might not feel it, it is a really big thing to be out visibly queer, particularly in a sports environment, and particularly one where drink is taken. Because that can often lower people's inhibitions to say things that they might not otherwise say. So we wanted to create something that said, this is a safe place for you. This is your place. This is your club as well. And this is somewhere that is welcoming to everybody. So that was the crux of where we came from. And it's kind of evolved a bit from there. And we've sort of worked on it over the years.
I saw that research tied to inclusion initiatives. Some rugby players reported hearing derogatory slurs in training environments. A study found 69% of male rugby players had recently heard slurs like fag or dyke in the sport. And Harlequins players and ambassadors have spoken publicly about the importance of visibility, allyship, creating environments where everyone feels part of the game. How does Quins Pride support people dealing with some of these broader cultural issues in rugby?
I mean, a lot of it is about visibility. A lot of it's about standing up and saying, look, we're here. This is our place too. This is not somewhere you can exclude us from. And you're right. Okay. We talk about rugby crowds and how great rugby crowds are and how wonderful it is. And we all put on our red trousers and give each other a hug. And, we're wonderful to each other. But I've heard racism shouted from the terraces. I've heard homophobia shouted. I've heard sexism, misogyny shouted. I've heard ableism shouted. The difference with us and football is that football tends to get the bad rap when it's chanting. So it becomes almost a community issue. It becomes something which is very visible. It's very, very obvious. And we got some great links with some of our football friends in London clubs, particularly over at Chelsea, who've really faced into some of that. But what you find with rugby is individuals, drink has been taken, people shouting out, and there was no pushback on that. So where do we get involved? We've got involved with such initiatives as if you are a Quins fan and you've been to the Stoop, you'll notice little QR codes appeared on the back of seats and in the bars, which if you see or hear things which are not appropriate, and it doesn't have to be LGBT related, it can be any sort of discrimination, any sort of ill behaviour. We help the club to set that up, that you can now scan that on your phone and report to a steward and get a steward involved and get that situation closed down before it becomes out of hand. It's things like that where we can help to support the club about what's right, what's not right. And also just, again, I used the word authenticity. It's very easy for clubs to sort of say, yay, pride, right? Every year you will notice at various points in the calendar, and I don't want to knock them for this. It's, I know why they're doing it, but you'll see all the other Prem clubs will have a picture of one of their players at the big stoop at Twickenham saying equality is important or diversity is important, and they might be holding up a rainbow ball or something. And everyone knows what happens is at the start of the season, so in August, early September, every club sends a couple of their players up to HQ, and they just do a series of photo shoots. So, right, can you take a picture with the trophy? Now, can you take a picture looking happy with the trophy? Can you take a picture looking sad with the trophy? Can you take a picture celebrating? Can you take a picture looking angry? Can you take a picture for Black History Month? Can you take a picture for Pride Month? And I know why we're doing it. And it's important that you start to think in this way, but actually there's so little authenticity in that. And I think where Quins have been very different is it has come from below. It's come from grassroots. It's come from the team. And we've really pushed back against stereotyping. So ideas come up and again, it's okay, but people say, oh yeah, can we have a drag queen deliver the ball? And we said, no, let's not have a drag queen deliver the ball. You know, it's not what it's about. Or can the players run out to YMCA? It's a bit cliched, you know, so we set the music and we sort of choose a whole load of queer anthems that LGBT people would recognise and are celebratory of. So again, it's that level of authenticity that shines out from us and that we want other clubs to sort of pick up on. So from a culture perspective, that's where we're driving it, is making it real, relevant, and authentic. Okay, I'm going to say authentic. If you just put a penny in the box every time I say authentic, and we'll have a pint by the end of it.
Well, I think in the business world, speaking to gay friends I've got, they're saying over the last sort of decade, there's been a lot of pride washing, hasn't there? So come around Pride time, every organisation or every business will have some merchandise, and we need to be careful it doesn't just become that tick box exercise. Like you say, it actually means something. It's actually come from somewhere genuine, and the community has been built, and there are roots to it. So I can sort of understand what you're saying there, rather than just it's Pride, let's celebrate Pride, let's put it on the calendar, it's another day. It has to be meaningful, otherwise it's just a empty gesture, isn't it, really?
Well, that's it. I mean, look, I'm trans and bi 365 days of the year, right? So I don't do Pride Month, I don't do LGBT History Month and then go back to something else. You know, this is me all the time. So it has to be all the time. And look, you know, I talk about experiences and this is my personal experience. So I transitioned in 2019, having lived my life, you know, from the age of 6, from the time I started playing rugby, knowing I was a girl, knowing that I couldn't deal with who I was. You know, this was a real thing I had to carry for more years than I want to think about. You know, and I had 2 attempts to end my own life. You know, and the last one of those was in 2019. And that was the catalyst. It was like, I can't keep doing this. You know, I'm nothing if not a learner. You know, I knew that a third time would not end well. So the experience with the club was with 2 things, right? If you've got a season ticket, it's got your name on it, right? And my name now is not the name I used to have, you know, funnily enough. And one of the things I had to do with many things is phone the club and say, look, I need to change the name on my season ticket. Okay, what are you changing? Yeah, it's Emily Hamilton. And they were brilliant. They were absolutely fantastic. You know, some of the organisations I changed my name with, it was a real pain, but the club couldn't have been better. And that was the first sign for me that there was something deeper than just it's going to be, you know, a bit of pride washing or whatever it is. But my first match back at the Stoop, and the pandemic really put a spanner in the works, because of course none of us were watching any matches at the Stoop through that season. But my first match back, I came back in and I wasn't in my proper seat because of course it was first match post-pandemic, so we were all in those, you know, bubble seats where you were 2 people and there was a gap and everything else. But the first time I walked back as myself, I park in the car park over at Twickenham Stadium, so you cross the sort of A316 over the bridge. That walk, which is, you know, quite famous for anyone who's a Quins fan, we all line the route as the players go to the big Stoop for the big matches. That walk was the most terrifying walk I've ever done. And I served in the army. I've served, you know, in places where people are shooting at you, but I was more terrified walking over that bridge and walking into the Stoop, not knowing how I'd be responded to. I'm very visibly queer. You know, I sound very tall, very broad. I didn't know how that was going to go, and it was okay. Right, everyone was fab, but that level of uncertainty is something that visibly queer people will carry with them. That, you know, if they want to come with their partner, if they want to, you know, your instinct if you're there with a partner and we win, which is nice when we do win, is to jump up and hug your partner and to celebrate and to, you know, you win big, you want to give the big hug. You know, you might even give your partner a kiss. You know, on those moments, a heterosexual person isn't thinking anything about that. The guy sitting behind me talking to his girlfriend isn't thinking anything about that. He's just talking about, you know, whatever his interpretation of the laws was and getting on with it. But for a queer couple, that's a really big thing. You know, for a visibly trans person, that's a really big thing. And we wanted to lessen that level of fear. We wanted to make it so people didn't feel that way. that, you know, we've got a presence at the Stoop at every home match. We're in the Robshaw bar. You know, we at our expense. So we've had some sponsorship through one of the companies that my vice chair runs, and I've personally put a lot of money in. We give away rainbow laces to people so they can demonstrate that value. We had some very limited edition car stickers, which I think I'll do a few more of those. You know, just little bits and pieces, badges, but people can come, they can just talk to us. They know there's a place where there will be other LGBT fans. And it's just, again, that little bit of real estate that says, don't be frightened, don't be worried. And we say to people, if you want us to come and meet you at the station and walk in with you, if you want us to meet you at your car and walk across the 316, we'll do that. We'll walk in with you. That for me, you know, that was the difference, was actually people knowing that that's there. And I know that every match we have at least one interaction with somebody, which is important, whether it be with the mother of a girl who'd just come out as a lesbian, and she came to us and wanted to get some laces to show her daughter that she was, you know, accepting, and that her daughter was loved and part of the family. You know, the guy who coaches a girls' team who wanted laces for the girls because he wanted to reiterate to them that he wanted to be inclusive. You know, the people who come up and all these people who keep coming up to me saying, I'm a stale white heterosexual guy, but I think you're doing really well. It's like, don't worry, you don't have to tell me you're stale white and heterosexual. I can see that. That's really obvious, right? You know, ditch the red trousers. You know, they're very passé. But it's lovely that you're there for us, right? That bit we really love. You know, come up and tell us that you're with us, and come up and tell us that you're supportive of us. Those things make it really worthwhile for us, because, you know, at the moment, particularly at the moment, things are getting worse. They're getting much, much worse, you know, particularly for the trans community. Those are moments of light. Those are moments of joy. You know, Jack, who's my vice chair, many of you will know Jack. You'll certainly have heard Jack. He was out at La Rochelle, you know, at the weekend, and he had people coming up to him there and saying, you know, stick with it, you know, stay with it. We know it's hard. We know you're getting bashed about. We see in the comment sections, but we really support you. And you're seeing people in the Pride jerseys, only club that's ever done a Pride jersey. See one on screen now. You know, with the only club that's ever had a Pride jersey, they sold like hotcakes. People are wearing them. That means the world to us. You know, these things all add up, because what they're saying is, you're part of our family. You're part of the Quins family. You know, and we'll stand up for you, and we'll stand up and support you. Really important.
What's the reaction been like from other supporters and from the club itself?
I mean, it's a good mix. I mean, look, broadly positive, I think, is the really important thing to say. I mean, the club have been great. We've had our moments. You know, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I mean, there have been moments where we've picked the club up on things that have happened. You know, we've had to sort of set them a little bit back on the authenticity train. We've had to make sure that we're thinking about real LGBT people, not the caricatures that you know they would otherwise see. It's been really difficult, because you've got some awful stuff happening at the RFU and the other, you know, home governing bodies, and the club are in a really difficult position, because, you know, part of that organisation. You can't just walk away and say, sorry, we're not going to be part of the RFU anymore, we're going to do something else. You know, that's not going to happen. So we've had to work through that with the fans. I say it's been largely positive. You know, I think about, there's been a few times at Pride matches where I've gone pitch side, or one of our members have gone pitch side and done an interview. I was on the big screens, you know, 14 and however many thousand people, and walking back to my seat, you know, having people stop you on the way and just say, you know, that took a lot of courage. Thank you. And thank you for saying it. And, you know, it's great and good on you, and keep going. That's really good. And then, of course, there is the downside. There's no two ways about it. There are, as in life, there are anti-LGBT people, there are anti-trans people, there are bigots, there are, you know, dare I say it, within the club, there are racists, there are misogynists, there are all of those, you know, because we are a microcosm of society, and some of them become vocal, and sometimes, particularly on social media, you know, which is the place where all of the generals like to assemble and show how brave they are. You know, they will pop up and they will say things. You know, we've seen it in the last season where it's not been great, where they will equate poor performance on the pitch to us having a pride flag, you know, in the North Village, or, you know, that we've got Quins Pride, or, oh, you know, we did something ridiculous with providing a sensory room for people on the autism spectrum. You know, so, you know, we've done things around neurodivergence, we've done things around Black History Month, and these are being equated as somehow affecting performance on the pitch, which is a nonsense.
Is this
See,
sort of like when people say, "Oh, Harlequins are gone woke" and things
yeah,
like that?
yeah. I mean, I always like to ask, what the hell, what does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah.
No one ever knows. It just woke seems to be this sort of catch-all term. It's like
Yeah.
politically correct, gone mad, or
Mm.
all of those predecessors, which just basically means treating people with respect and dignity, and not getting into other people's business. So yeah, we do see those. Quins have gone woke, and Quins are doing X, Quins are doing Y, and quite very often we're sort of sitting in the background saying Quins are doing none of those things.
Yeah.
We don't spend anywhere near the amount of time I'd like us to spend with players. For example, we're not connected as Quins Pride with the player group. Of course, we've had them speak up, and that's been very good when we've had a few of the players speak up. But this suggestion that we're in and out of the club and we're sort of setting the agenda.
Yeah.
No, we're not. We are proudly independent. We do speak to the club, and we do have a good relationship with the club. But this whole you've gone woke and you're losing matches. It's like, just pipe down.
I think a lot of these attitudes, they come from a place of, well, a lack of education, fear, and it's been very hostile, hasn't it, to the trans community in the media over the last 5 years.
Well,
it's been a very difficult time, isn't it?
Well, it is a very difficult time. I mean, look, it's like any point in history. If you're looking at where authoritarian states or governments want to look for a scapegoat, they look for a small scapegoat. The best scapegoats are the small ones, the ones you haven't likely met.
Sure.
In many cases, I'm the only trans person anyone's ever knowingly met as a trans person, and I confound their expectations. I'm not like those awful caricatures that are put out there.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to do that if you say trans people do this, largely trans women are like this, trans women do this, trans women do that. It's much easier to do that when you don't know any trans women. You say trans women are perverts and they do X, Y, Z, and you think, well, yeah, I know Emily, not particularly perverted, really an exhibitionist. She's a bit frumpy, actually. She's nearly 50 and she dresses that way. So there's a whole load of stuff that comes from that. But look, I don't know if we can say this on your podcast. I'm not sure about your policy on this, but some people are arseholes. There's just no getting away from it.
No.
And there'll be homophobic arseholes, transphobic arseholes, racist arseholes. They don't really need an excuse, but it's quite nice for them to have one. They like to have something to tie it to make it sound legitimate. I'm not a bigot, but okay. So the but tells us everything we need to know.
But I think the amount of effort and energy put at the trans community for such a small community, because I think the last census is, what is that, 0.5% of the population?
It's about half. We think globally. I mean, the problem with the census is that the bigots got involved and tried to have all of the attempts to actually properly measure us thrown out, which is a pain, because of course that's how we start to do things like funding healthcare and support services. Yeah, but global efforts think the number is somewhere around 0.5%, of which half of those are roughly trans women. So it's 0.5% are the people who are vilified the most. And for trans men, and let's not forget trans men and non-binary people, but trans men, they just get forgotten. They just get infantilized, and actually there's a big dose of misogyny in that, right? So they're seen as silly women who don't know what they're doing, and are trying to get away from that, and that's profoundly insulting. As if you know any trans men, if you've ever had the privilege of meeting some trans men, they are sorry to say it, but they are the best of men. They are all the masculinity without the toxicity. They are really fine people. Now, not every one of them, because you know what? Even some trans people are assholes. There are a few. I've met them.
Yeah.
We have them in our community too. But we've got to call it out. Got to speak about it. But yeah, it's not. I give a lot of talks about the sort of trans experience of the trans community. I have another gay job on top of my day job where I do that. And the reality is you can try and apply logic to the argument, but it's not a logical argument. It's not designed to be logical. We did the logic years and years ago where we depathologized being trans, where we went through that process of explaining, just some people are trans. That is just how it is. And unfortunately, what we're trying to do now, or what society and certain governments are trying to do, is to repathologize and to put us back in a box. And actually, it's it's a denial of personal autonomy, bodily autonomy, and trans people are just the first lever. You know, we've seen a few court cases recently where sort of ultra religious groups are sort of funding some of these cases. They're the same people who are funding anti-abortion cases. So talking about bodily autonomy for women, they are the same people who are funding rollbacks of interracial marriage in the US. So a lot of these things are interconnected, and just trans people, we're just quite a useful bogeyman. So I would just say to people, if you are a Quins fan, do come into the Rob Shaw bar and see how boring I really am. I don't drink, don't even vape anymore. You know, I'm just like the most boring middle-aged woman trying to get through life without having a hormonal disaster, because we have hormonal disasters just like all of the other women of a certain age. You'll see that I'm nothing like the caricatures.
Okay, so if I was to come to a Pride event or come on Pride match day, Jim's reliably and told me that Harlequins hosted the first ever Pride game in professional rugby union. If I came along on that day, what would be happening? What would I experience? What kind of things are getting involved? Obviously, you on the pitch, talking and being displayed on a big scoreboard. So you've come a long way from walking from your car across the road to being interviewed on the pitch. What kind of things will we see? Is it a fun day? Is it an awareness day, or is it all of those things?
It's all of those things. And look, I just want to say as well, we are the only club to do a Pride match. You know, this is the embarrassing thing. After all these years, we're the first and still the only globally professional rugby union club to do this stuff. Which actually I'm really proud we're first. I'm ashamed we're the only. But yeah, what do you see? It's going to be fun. Absolutely, it's fun. It's going to be informative. Yes, it's all of those things. You will see us coming out of our Rob Shaw bar environment. You know, so we come out into the North Village because we try to get the Pride match at a time nearer to the end of the season when it's a bit warmer, because Pride really is not, and we had to tell the Prem this a few years ago, Pride is not a Friday night in January when it's peeing with rain or sleet inside. That is not the time for Pride. Pride is about being visible and being outside. And so we tend to be outside. You will see us, our members, me being interviewed. We get involved with Quins Live with our friend Dave Rogers, who's been a real big friend to Quins. So Dave hosts quite a lot of our sort of broadcast and public facing events. We've had, we do this with the women's team as well. So this is not just about the men. This is about our work with the women's team. So when we have the women's match, we've got on the pitch in those giant hamster balls and had races with our friends at King's Cross Steelers, who are our partner club, our IGR International Gay Rugby partner club. So we get involved with them as well. So yeah, what you'll see is people being openly supportive of inclusion, openly supportive of the LGBTQIA community. It's about being part of the family as well. So what we're wanting to do, and for any of you who are of a certain age, and look, I'm just going to make some judgments here. We're all of a certain age, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm sitting here. You know, we started the show talking about Just for Men. You know, I'm sitting here with my Clairol root touch up that I need to do later on.
Yeah.
Let's live with that.
Can I borrow some of that?
You can. You might need a few boxes. You know, not being rude or anything, but it is only for the roots. You know, you might need a bigger packet. But you know, we're all of a certain age, and you'll remember what it was like. I mean, it's bad now. It's getting worse. But in the 80s, the 90s, why didn't I come out from the age of 6, which was 82, to my final coming out, which was at the age of 43? Yeah, it's a long time.
I don't think you could, though, could you? You got to think back to 82. That was very right. I mean,
I tried in 87 to come out, and I was conversion therapied by a doctor.
Yeah.
So that's where somebody tries to change your sexuality or gender identity.
Yeah.
I tried to come out after I left the army in the late 90s and was abused and embarrassed by a work colleague, which ended up with my first attempt to take my own life in London. You know, if you think about those years where it was such a taboo, it was something you didn't show the children. One of the things about the Pride match is it's a family event. It's not sexualized. And this thing, it's like Pride, it's all about sex. Well, it's nothing about sex. It's actually about humans. It's about people.
Yeah.
It's about, if you see 2 women or 2 men holding hands, that's because they love each other. That's because they're coming to rugby because they love rugby. They love each other, and they don't want to compromise on either of those things.
I think when we keep coming down, to the argument, it's always that base thing, isn't it? It's always about sex and toilets. And so, I mean, you don't go up to like a straight couple, do you? And sort of say, oh, did you have sex last night? Well, excuse me, just sort of going out for a meal. There's no reason it should be sexualized, is it?
Well, there isn't. I mean, look, and this is part of the problem with bigotries is, a lot of the questions that are posed to people like myself are, however roundabout they are, all come down to what's inside your knickers. It's a really bizarre thing to ask somebody, isn't it?
It really is.
Hi, nice to meet you. Have you got what's in your underpants?
Yeah,
I can think of better opening gambits. Maybe talk about our performance in the Champions Cup. That's going to get you much further than asking about people's genitalia. We try to buck that trend because it's just not on the agenda. The agenda for us is safety. The agenda for us is a family atmosphere. The agenda for us is usualizing, and I use the word usualizing. It's not normalizing, because normal is rubbish. Don't be normal, kids. If you're out there, don't be normal. It's boring and it's rubbish. Usualizing, seeing trans people, seeing gay people, seeing lesbian people, seeing queer people out and about. That's what it's all about. Because look at where we are. We're in West London, right? We're in a massively diverse city. I ask a question, right? Where are the queer people on the pitch in rugby? Don't know where they are. Where we are in West London, where are the brown and black people on the pitch? Really? There's some real questions for us to ask about how representative of the communities we serve. We're much better at that in the women's game. If you look at the women's game, the makeup of the game, both in terms of queer people, both in terms of racial diversity, we've got to break some of those barriers. And we're not going to do that if we can't do it in the fan base, if we can't do it in the stands, if we can't do it in the bars. So Pride does that.
Yeah. So the takeaway from those events is it usualizes the situation, and also picking up allies along the way, and people educating themselves. Sounds like a really, really positive thing there from the Quins. I knew I'd picked the right club. So thanks, Jim.
All right. Do you think events like your Pride match days have changed perceptions within the sport more broadly?
Yes, and yes, they have. Okay, yeah. Let's be really positive about this. Yes, they have, because we have conversations we couldn't or wouldn't have had 5 or 6 years ago. Now, of course, there's a flip side to that, which some of those conversations are really tough. Some of those are, we're having to be quite upfront with some of the big stakeholders in the game. But positively speaking, the Women's World Cup this year, I spoke at Rugby Pride, which is something you've never seen before. So there's a big sort of Rugby Pride push. So at the launch up in Manchester, I had some choice words about the sort of whole trans ban, but on a broader basis, if you think about, how many openly queer players there were at the Women's World Cup, and how that was, in a way, unremarkable. There was almost a reverse issue around gay representation in the women's game. It was almost suggested that you had to be a lesbian to play rugby. If you're playing rugby, you must be a lesbian. Well, no, quite a lot of our players aren't lesbians, but you know what? They don't care. They don't find it a slight. They don't find it offensive to be suggested they might be lesbian. They don't take that as some great affront in the same way as many straight male players might be. So, well, you're playing rugby, you must be a bit gay. They take affront to that. No, I'm not. I'll prove it. I think there's a real difference there. So I think we are having some more of those conversations about that usualization, about representation, about how we even discuss people's sexualities. Because a few years ago, that's all that would have been talked about. But actually, you think about the Red Roses team. What were we talking about with the Red Roses? And look, I'm not, just for the record, I'm not English, so I was pleased for them. I was thrilled to see Ellie do well. My team didn't do so well. But was the conversation about sexualities? Was the conversation about private lives? No, it was about the rugby on the pitch. It was about the quality of the game. And anyone who's followed the women's game over the last few years, and for me, the real awakening, it was always there, but the real awakening was during lockdown, when women's games were free on YouTube, and you just sit and you watch the quality of play. The standard of play is interstellar. And what are we talking about? We're talking about that. We're not talking about people's private lives, but it doesn't matter. So when the Red Roses go to celebrate the win, when they go to the balls, when they're pictured with their partners, some of them have male partners, Some of them don't have male partners, and nobody cared. That's where we want to get to. That's the world you want to be in, is it doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't matter in that respect. So, because a lot of people say to me, "Oh, it doesn't matter. I don't want to hear who you take to bed." No, that's not what we mean. What we mean is we do want you to hear who we're going home with at night. We do want you to hear about the people we love, but we don't want it to be an issue for you. We just want to say it because we're proud, because that's, we're proud of our partners. We're proud of the people we're with.
Right. Now, one thing we talk about a lot on this podcast is mental health. What difference does having a visible, welcoming group look like to people who might otherwise feel excluded?
Yeah, look, I've talked about my mental health, and I've hit rock bottom, and particularly being closeted, it's an incredible burden to carry. So, the mental capacity you use hiding a large part of your identity, you don't know how bad that is until you come out of the closet and you go, bloody hell, I've got a load of space to think about other stuff. Sports, fundamentally spectator sport and things we go to watch, for those of us who are just too old, too fat, too lazy to be playing anymore, we're out on the stands. You're going there because you want to enjoy yourself. You're going there because you want to meet other people and be a part of something which is a communal event. If you feel that's going to be risky, if you feel that you're not going to be welcomed, if you feel you're going to be on edge and worrying about your safety, or worrying about what somebody's going to say, or worrying whether you can use the loo, or whether you can even be there, you're not going to enjoy it. You're not going to put yourself in that place. And for a lot of LGBT people, they isolate themselves because they feel that these spaces aren't for them, whether that be sports, whether that be socializing, simple things like going to the cinema. People become lock-ins effectively and shut-ins. And for anyone who has suffered with mental ill health, you will know that then becomes a self-perpetuation. If you are in that situation, clearly not everyone is the same, but for many people, that isolation, that loneliness, that being just inside your own head with your own thoughts can be a really dangerous and dark place to be. And us saying there is somewhere you can come, there is somewhere on a Friday night, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, whenever we get our matches. It used to be all Friday nights, but whichever that is. But we're saying that's a place you can come. That's your place too. That's a welcoming place. Actually, you're giving somebody an outlet, and that's really, really important. That's a lifeline, in fact, for some people. And we have some of our members who, before the match, are you going to be there? Emily, will the stand be there? They just want to make sure, because they're coming on their own. They might not have family. Because this is another thing. Remember about LGBTQIA people. Unlike with many other minority groups, it can also be a source of ostracism from family. So if you think about people who are abused for their racial identity, for example, out in public, often they will at least have the safety of home. They'll come home and they'll have a family around them, who share the same identity. For queer people, queer young people thrown out of home, forced to leave because they're not accepted. You've got to provide other places for them to know they're welcome, to know they're loved, to know they're part of a community. And I think from a mental health perspective, that sense of belonging, that sense of safety, psychological safety, you can't underestimate what that means. And I'll be really open. My mental health, I've had some health issues. Some stuff has had to be pushed back because of it recently, and I felt absolutely miserable. I'll give you the appalling truth is that today is the first day for 3 weeks that I've washed my hair, which is disgusting. It was absolutely vile, but that is part of the way my mental health treats me, is that self-care goes out the window. And I have washed it today. We're not in person, so you don't get the pleasure of my beautiful hair serum, which smells divine. Doing those sorts of things, these are key things for getting me back out of my hole. And part of those is because I want to go and see a rugby match, because I want to go out and I want to see my friends. And I'm not going to put them through sitting next to me, dripping hair oil onto them and stinking. That's
yeah,
got
sure.
some sort of self-respect.
Yeah. So you've outlined what success looks like for Quins Pride in 5 years' time, where you're trying to get to. Gemma, I think you've got a question about young supporters.
I have. What's your message for LGBTQ LGBTQ plus young people who might not feel welcome in sport right now?
You have a place is the first thing I'd say. It will feel hard, and so particularly for those who are trans, they're going to find that they're at the forefront of this. My point is, it's not easy. There's no way to sugarcoat this. I'm not going to say to you it's fine, it's okay, just carry on. It's not like that. So let's not tell lies about it. But the arc of the world is always that things get better. It's not always a straight line, but things always get better, because what is right is always what is right. And there are those of us who are using Clairol root touch up and are of riper years, as they say, who are fighting, who are being visible, who are in the boardrooms. We are in front of the people who make the difference in rugby, in other sports, in the wider society. And we will not stop fighting for you. We will not stop fighting to make sure you have a place where you can get involved. And all I would say is, life can be really, really tough, particularly when you're different. But life is a joy. Life is a gift, and sport is something which really just gives back much, much more than it ever takes from you. So if you can find that place that you can do something where you can be active, where you can be involved in sport, where even if you're watching sport and getting involved in that way, it's worth everything. It's worth everything more than the fear. It's worth everything more than the abuse that you think you're going to get, because actually most people are kind. Most people are nice. The problem with most people is they're also quite quiet. So just remember that the quiet people are there. They are nice. They are kind. There are a few really noisy bigots, but we're going to make sure we mobilise the quiet people. We mobilise the kind people. And look, Quins Pride, if you like rugby, if you like Harlequins, Quins Pride is there for you too. Come see us, and we'll tell you all the things you shouldn't do. If you don't want to end up with wonky knees and all of the things that we have as old crocs. That's not really fair, because Jack's not even 40 yet, but he just walks around like he is.
He's a young croc then.
He is a young croc, yeah. He just looks like he's about 60.
About 30 years. Emily, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for all of that, for opening up in the way you have, and thank you for what you're doing with Quins Pride.
No, it's been lovely. Thank you for having me on, and thanks to all the listeners as well for all their support, because I do know we've got a lot of support out there. And if you want to know more, just shameless plug, if you go onto the internet, Quins Pride, quinspride.com, you can find us, you can join us. It doesn't cost you anything. We don't charge any subs. We don't want there to be any barriers. And you can learn more about what we do.
You can join as an ally as well as.
Of course you can. Absolutely, yeah. We're completely open. All you have to be saying, and actually I had this question: do you let anyone in? All you have to be saying is that you are supportive of the entire LGBTQIA community. We don't have people who pick and choose. That's the only criteria.
Excellent.
I have one more question. Totally not Quins related.
Is it about 70s pop? I'm good on those.
No, but I feel like you're going to be very good at this question, so it's all good. Your hair looks amazing. I need to know the product, the lovely smelling serum that was mentioned earlier.
It is Goldwell Just Smooth. It smells divine. I was walking. I got it to my salon as I was walking back from my salon. A very gruff delivery driver with a generously shown bum cleavage admired the smell of my hair as I walked past, which I thought was probably the nicest compliment I'd ever had in my, at that point, 45 years.
That was Emily Hamilton from Quins Pride, with a reminder that good news doesn't always have to be a headline. Sometimes it's just people deciding to make things better for each other. We started doing this podcast because the news has a habit of making everything feel enormous and hopeless. And then you hear something like that and you realise that goodness and hope and kindness can turn up wearing a scarf, meeting mates at a rugby ground, and making space for people who didn't used to feel welcome. Also, it's nice to be reminded that rugby, a sport built entirely around controlled violence and confusing laws, can also be about kindness and community. You don't have to love rugby, and you don't have to support Harlequins to love the idea behind Quins Pride. It's just people saying very simply, you belong here. And if more spaces did that, we'd all probably need this podcast a bit less. So if this week's been a lot, just take this as a small win. Something good is happening somewhere. People are looking out for each other and not just for themselves, which must be absolutely baffling to Robert Jenrick. We'll be back again next week, whether you like it or not, with more good news and snarky remarks about politicians. So thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting the podcast. If you can find a minute or two to like, to subscribe, to comment, to share, we'd really appreciate it.
I was just waiting for Stu's US stats update because that's where that usually comes in.
It does normally jump in just at that point I'm finishing. So that's why I thought I'd pause and give
I wanted to bring that up, but I sort of restrained myself because, you know, Jim always says, you know, what about the local listeners? I love the local listeners, but hello, Virginia and California. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, good. Thanks, Stu. So until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And remember that despite what you might hear to the contrary, that everything's fine. Probably.